You have no right being here unless you're invited, and all those officials don't talk about our ceremonies.
Tonight, a reaction to a Sundance in Saskatchewan where the RCMP were called over social distancing concerns.
We need the same supports for mental health, family support, education, medical needs.
And the Alberta Native Friendship Centre says more COVID funding is needed for urban Indigenous people. Hello and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. We begin in Ottawa, where today Justin Trudeau revealed the plans for employment during the summer months, and the Finance Minister introduced help for Indigenous businesses. Jamie Pashagumskum has more.
This morning, outside Rideau Cottage, the Prime Minister announced $450 million for wages for scientific researchers and research institutions. And he said as of today, students can now apply for the Canada Emergency Student Benefit. And Trudeau announced further help for businesses ready to open back up.
So this morning, I can confirm that we will extend the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy by another 3 months to the end of August. Business owners, please take confidence from this announcement. You now have some runway to catch your breath as you get restarted. So please, bring back your employees.
Meanwhile, at the COVID committee meeting, Finance Minister Bill Morneau announced subsidies for Indigenous organizations. He said the new regulations are effective immediately and retroactive back to March 15th.
Also eligible now are tax-exempt Indigenous-owned corporations and partnerships that include Indigenous governments and eligible employers. This will ensure more Indigenous employers can support their workers.
Also in the news, Indigenous women's groups met with the Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Affairs. Now this wasn't televised, but presenting were the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls and Two-Spirited People Manitoba Coalition, the Native Women's Association of Canada, and the Women of the Métis Nation. Now they wanted to know when Canada will be implementing the 231 calls to justice recommended by the inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Of great concern to all three parties is how this pandemic is affecting abused Indigenous women. They say even before the COVID-19, Native women's shelters were full. Now, these women, many of them with children, locked up with a spouse prone to abuse, well, now they're really trapped. Jamie Pashagumskum, APTN National News, Ottawa.
All 14 cases of COVID reported in Bearspaw First Nation have now recovered since we first reported the cases 2 weeks ago. Northern Saskatchewan also continues to be one of the epicenters of the outbreak in Canada. Quebec continues to lead far and above the rest of the country with 40,724 cases. Ontario remains the next highest with 21,922 cases. Nationally, there are 73,829 cases of COVID-19. There have been 5,499 deaths and 34,199 of the cases have recovered. Concerns continue to be raised about a traditional Sundance ceremony in Saskatchewan last weekend, where the RCMP showed up on 2 occasions. Priscilla Wolf has the latest.
Clayton Sutherland was hosting the Sundance on Sunday, May 10th, when 2 RCMP officers went to the ceremony site.
Both groups walked towards the Sundance ceremony as politely as I could. I stopped them and told them they couldn't proceed because guns are not allowed. I didn't really want to explain the whole traditional explanation as to why the RCMP and guns were not permitted, because I didn't want a confrontation.
Sutherland thought everything was okay and that the officers were leaving when he noticed them driving towards the arbor. He says a woman had to physically stand in front of the RCMP vehicle to stop them from going any further.
And no one is permitted to go across that east gate, because that's for spirituality purposes. She more or less held up her arms and she motioned with her head. No, they can't go through there. So they stopped their cruiser and they backed up and they drove off.
The RCMP released this statement to APTN when asked about the officers going to the Sundance site. As the province continues to have a public health order in place, the Saskatchewan RCMP remains committed to following up on reports of public gatherings and other activities that may contravene to public health order. At no time did RCMP officers ask for the ceremony to stop. No charges were laid by the RCMP. Sutherland says social distancing practices were followed during the ceremony. Indigenous Services Canada says it contacted the leadership of the Cree Nation to discuss precautions that could be taken. ISC maintains regular communications with First Nations leaders across Saskatchewan and have committed to developing jointly a more culturally responsive process to support communities in cultural gatherings. Any decision to cancel or postpone these types of cultural practices remains the decision of community leadership alone. Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations Chief Bobby Cameron was firm with his response to what happened.
Stay off our lands. These are our lands. You have no right being here unless you're invited. And all those officials, don't talk about our ceremonies. That is none of your business.
Priscilla Wolf, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Minister of Indigenous Services Mark Miller addressed this issue in a press conference yesterday, stating Canada will not ban these events from happening, as was the case in the past.
While banning sun dances, potlatches, among other Indigenous cultural and spiritual practices is unfortunately a dark stain on Canada's history, I want to assure everyone listening that even in the face of a historic pandemic, Canada must not and will not prohibit these important practices. Any decision to cancel or postpone these events is a decision that is solely at the discretion of the community's leadership. I would, however, like to reiterate the importance of the public health measures that we have been repeating since the beginning of this pandemic.
We want to hear what you think about the Sundance situation in Saskatchewan. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptn news. Also, you can follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Indigenous news. As we head into month 3 of the pandemic, nurses continue to tirelessly work the front lines. While hospitals work to treat the tens of thousands of confirmed cases, many health practitioners are stressing the importance of addressing mental health as well. Brittany Hobson brings us this.
The symptoms of the COVID-19 virus have been reported on almost daily for the past several weeks. But what about the impact it has on things we can't see, like mental health?
This is not just a virus. This is much more than that. It's every psychological warfare sometimes, and we're seeing that. And I think that
Vanessa Willow is a psychiatric nurse working at the Aurelia Soldiers Memorial Hospital in Ontario. Willow has been working the front line since the pandemic hit. She says it's difficult to encourage social distancing with people who are in crisis.
It's heartbreaking to see, that families are separating because they can't cope anymore with the loss of income or just the distancing and the touch, not being able to touch and hold your family. I mean, those are basic needs.
Long-term isolation and a lack of social interaction can leave many feeling helpless. Nursing student Jamie Bowers witnessed this while completing her schooling, just as the virus made its way to Manitoba.
We very quickly noticed mental health issues arising as a result of social isolation. So anxiety started to heighten, depression, things like that arising from this pandemic that really required mental health care.
During Bowers' final placement, she had to find new ways to treat patients.
We weren't allowed to see our clients in person anymore, so we kind of had to adapt to that situation and meet people's mental health needs either over the phone or by mail or utilizing online resources.
Last month, Manitoba set up a virtual therapy program to address mental health concerns during the pandemic. However, remote communities without reliable internet may not be able to access the service. Bauer says this shows the need for more resources in communities. She hopes to return to her home community of Norway House Cree Nation to provide services. While Canadians adapt to a new normal, there are still things people can do to take care of their mental health. Willow says along with working, nourishing hobbies has helped her.
Even though I'm powerless with this disease out there, with this virus out there, I'm not powerless in what I can do with my time. I can do something.
This most importantly includes never being afraid to ask for help. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
4 times a year, Yukon First Nations leaders and the Premier meet for a forum to discuss ongoing issues. This latest forum was a virtual one, and the focus was COVID-19. The Yukon is slowly moving back to normal and reducing COVID restrictions, but the economy and the delivery of social programs has taken a big hit. Grand Chief Peter Johnston of the Council for Yukon First Nations said that helping the most at-risk citizens must be a priority.
We have to be very cognizant of the impoverished realities that they face, and those people in particular are going to have probably the most hardest rebound when it comes to not only inputting back into the economy and the lifestyle, but we have to ensure that they're given every aspect to find success and hopefully prosperity in their lives also. So it's very important that we support the people that need the most support, because at the end of the day, we're only as strong as they are. So.
It's time for a quick break, but coming up next week, Tina House brings us the story about a mother trying to save her daughter, who's an addict on Vancouver's downtown east side, from getting COVID-19. Here's a preview of that story.
It's another rainy day in Vancouver, and Mavis and her friend Marlene Jack are out once again looking for Faith. It's something she's had to do over the years. Because of Faith's addiction, she doesn't always stay in contact. Except this time, there's more of an urgency. With the COVID-19 pandemic, she's scared and worried for her safety, especially living here on Vancouver's downtown east side, where social distancing orders are not being followed.
She does have a lot of mental health issues, and she needs to be in a safe environment like that, especially with the pandemic.
Starting on the East Coast now, 10 degrees in Charlottetown and plus 12 and cloud in Halifax. Plus 2 in Nain and plus 6 in Happy Valley Goose Bay. Plus 14 in Quebec City and plus 15 in Saguenay. Plus 20 in Peterborough and plus 18 in Toronto. Plus 15 in Timmins and plus 15 and cloud in Thunder Bay. Plus 14 in Thompson and plus 14 in sun in Norway House. Plus 20 in Winnipeg and plus 20 and cloud in Gimli. Plus 22 in Yorkton and plus 25 in Saskatoon. Plus 12 in Stony Rapids and plus 16 in La Ronge. Welcome back. After 9 years of searching, the family of a Saskatchewan teen who suddenly went missing has closure. Last week, the remains of Cody Ridge Wolf were found. Priscilla Wolf has the story.
In April of 2011, the 17-year-old went missing on the Muskowgan First Nation in southern Saskatchewan. He was walking home late at night after visiting his grandmother and friends. Foul play was never suspected in his disappearance. The family has tirelessly searched the area that they believe him last to be. His aunt, Myrna LaPlante, says the family searched that area every year.
We have absolutely just focused the last 9 years on trying to locate Cody. And, you know, the search was at the Muskowgan First Nation, many kilometers north, south, east, and west of the First Nation.
LaPlante says they had many searches over the years, which have included RCMP and volunteers.
Sometimes it's only been family that's been out there, and sometimes it's been just my brother Reg out there.
In early May, 2 youths were on an island in Muskowgan looking for goose eggs when they found the remains. It was confirmed it was Cody. His cousin, Jessica LaPlante, says there is now some closure and relief.
My family never gave up hope. You know, every year they never gave up hope and they never stopped speaking Cody's name.
The family wants to thank everyone who helped with searches and who reached out to them.
We must say a huge thank you to all of the individuals, all of the organizations, the elders, community members, people right across Canada.
With the search now over and Cody's body located, the family can finally lay him to rest.
Our next steps, of course, are for planning for, the celebration of his life for next weekend.
Priscilla Wolf, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
APTN Investigates uncovered thousands of letters written by Inuit tuberculosis patients during the epidemics in the 1950s and 60s. The team spent 3 years looking for the patients' families to bring their letters home. Producer Holly Moore is here to talk about the project. Holly, thanks for joining us. Let's just jump right into it. Tell us about the collection of letters.
So the letters were found at the Library and Archives of Canada, and what they show is a very painful era in Canadian history, the TB epidemics of the 1950s and 60s, where Inuit were mostly affected. So at one point, the entire half population of Canada was being treated down south. So these letters really show firsthand patient perspective of loneliness, lots of worry about family back home, and there were over 5,000 pages of documents that we received through an Access to Information request, showing about 800 individual patient names. And what they were was letters either between the patients and the administrators of the hospital or the patients and their families back home. And what we found out through our investigation is that they were opened by the department and then translated into English from the original Inuktitut, and then those were passed on to administrators who would then answer them. So a lot of these letters just never made it home.
So how did you go about finding these families?
It was a really long process. So if you think about the naming of Inuit, a lot of the people were just represented by their disc number. The disc number system was set up in the 50s because, Inuit names were much too difficult for the department at the time to try to learn. So we had to, just through good old-fashioned research, reaching out to people on Facebook, getting in touch with Inuit organizations, to find people who belong to these letters.
And what happens now?
Well, now the collection, what we're really hoping is that we can get more of these letters home to the families. So in the episode that I did and that Brittany Keogh did, we found 2 families who were reunited with their letters. And for a lot of people, that gave them this incredible sense of closure, because Inuit elders wouldn't talk about the time, they didn't want to remember the time. So what we're really hoping is that people will write to us and let us know if they want us to search the collection. Also, we've given the entire collection to the Nanilavut Initiative, which is a database that tracks Inuit who just never came home. And so we're really hoping that the letters go from being this historical document to getting to the families that really deserve to have them.
Perfect. Thanks, Holly. That's APTN Investigates' Holly Moore. You can watch the whole episode Writing Home tonight, right after the news. If you would like reporters to search the collection for your loved one, please email Brittany Keogh at bgeo@aptn.ca. It's time for one more break, but still to come, we'll tell you why the Alberta Native Friendship Centre Association believes they need significant help to deal with the pandemic. But first, here's the rest of tomorrow's weather forecast. Moving over to Western Canada now, plus 12 in Fort Chipewyan and plus 15 in Fort McMurray. 20 degrees in Calgary and 22 in a mix of sun and cloud in Lethbridge. 22 in Kamloops and 20 in Quesnel. 13 in Fort Nelson and 18 in a mix of sun and cloud in Smithers. 10 degrees in Dawson and minus 2 in Rock River. 2 degrees in Yellowknife and plus 5 in Fort Simpson. Minus 2 in Colville Lake and 0 degrees in Fort McPherson. Minus 2 in Repulse Bay and minus 2 in Chesterfield. Minus 1 in Clyde River and plus 4 in Arctic Bay. Welcome back. The Alberta Native Friendship Centre Association believes urban Indigenous communities need a lot more help to deal with the pandemic and more money. Chris Stewart has the story.
Len Morissette is the president of the Alberta Native Friendship Centre Association. He told APTN that urban Indigenous people are not getting the same amount of funding during the COVID-19 crisis. He says the Alberta Native Friendship Centres are still providing essential services and have not shut down, but money is running out.
We need the same supports for mental health, family support, education, medical needs, frontline services, soup kitchens, MAP programs. Everything we deal with in the urban centers is what the Friendship Center movement does on a regular basis.
Morissette says that of the $305 million allocated across Canada by the federal government, only $15 million was allocated to urban Indigenous organizations.
And the urban Indigenous is, as I said, populations in the cities, about 68% of urban Indigenous people in this region, and there's even higher percentages every province. They need to be recognized as their own, and that little money that was put forward doesn't really help in the long run.
Morissette wrote to the Prime Minister explaining the lack of representation of urban Indigenous peoples. He says urban Indigenous people are the fourth Indigenous group in Canada and should be recognized as such.
What basically we need is the government to recognize the urban Indigenous as our own entity and sort of understand the space that we exist in, that there is 4 spaces. So now First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, and urban Indigenous. And when that understanding, I believe, is that when people understand that space, then they'll understand why we are saying, hey, we need just as equal as support.
Morissette is hopeful for a response and action by the Prime Minister and the federal government. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
As we head into the long weekend, Indigenous artists are taking 3 days of live entertainment online. The Tuckaronto Music Festival was scheduled to happen in July, but a ban on gatherings put its future in question. Instead of postponing or canceling, performances from Digging Roots, Murray Porter, and more can be watched online this weekend. Candace Scott Moore is one of the organizers.
Oh, this is a completely free event. So it's online. You go to www.tkmf.ca, plus Facebook Live, YouTube Live. We're going to be everywhere. So, yeah, no tickets are needed, and it's a free event for everybody. And it's family friendly, so something for everyone.
Well, that's been your look at APTN National News for this Friday. But before we go, we leave you with this. Music from Brothers Wild, who will be performing for the Tuckaronto Music Festival on Saturday. I'm Daryl Stranger. We hope everyone has a happy and safe long weekend.
And though each place I seem to go, it leads me right back to you. I'd always loved you to the core. I never wanted anything more. I never wanted, never wanted, never wanted, never wanted. Oh no. I'll be waiting for